One South Texas congressman is proposing legislation that would compensate all of those affected by the coronavirus. Filemon Vela, who represents the 34th Congressional District, which includes parts of the Coastal Bend, tells our Rudy Trevino that his bill calls essentially for compensating anyone who's gotten sick from COVID-19 or family members who've lost a loved one.
We have those families who have suffered the loss of loved ones.
Congressman Filemon Vela filed a measure called the Coronavirus Victims Compensation Fund of 2020, a bill modeled after the September 11th Victims Compensation Fund. What inspired him to create this bill was one of his constituents who contracted the virus back in April.
And he was put on a ventilator, and today, even to this day, is still suffering the physical consequences of that ravaging infection. And it struck me that that the real victims here are those individuals across this country who've been infected with coronavirus.
The congressman says the bill is already getting positive feedback from fellow Democrats as they prepare to go back into session. Vela says he realizes even if the bill passes the House, it'll have an uphill battle once it reaches the Republican-controlled Senate. He says this pandemic doesn't discriminate along party lines.
It just seems to me that given what people around this country are going through, that the fair thing to do is to compensate them.
Now, the exact amount of compensation for individuals isn't in the bill, but the congressman used a figure of about $100,000 per family based on the 9/11 HEROES Act, adding the distribution would be handled in the same manner as that of the 9/11 funds.
So you have varying levels of damage kind of across the board, and the special master or administrator would be the one responsible for determining who gets what and how much they get.
Could such a bill, if passed into law, open the door to other legal ramifications, giving individuals the right to sue whoever or wherever they believe they contracted the virus?
Interestingly, no, not the way the bill is written.
3 News legal analyst Matt Manning says the bill is very specific.
Negligence and any other theory of liability is not going to be, I guess, addressed by the bill.
Manning points out that Republicans in the Senate are already pushing back should a bill without these stopgap measures be included.
This bill was introduced at the same time Mr. McConnell in the Senate has indicated that he would not allow any bill to pass unless there is coverage in terms of liability for churches and businesses. And all of that is intended to essentially shield businesses that are not following, or rather where they have followed CDC guidelines, and people claim that they contracted the virus from those places.
One other caveat to the COVID compensation bill includes that if a person has already received some sort of compensation, such as insurance benefits, their eligibility and amount of compensation could be limited. Rudy Trevino, 3 News.